Today we begin the project that we've been looking forward to since our channel began, the Fire series. Now you may have noticed that most of our videos at some point include fire in some way, and there's a reason for that. When you're talking about wilderness survival and primitive way of living, fire represents life or death, which is why we've never stopped our education and practice when it comes to making several methods of fire. We know how important it is to have multiple tricks in your bag for all things wilderness survival, but specifically, fire making. In this fire series, we've narrowed our subjects down to only our favorite methods and techniques, the most practical, the most useful, and the most teachable for earnest fire learners to apply. We're not interested in showing off all the ways we know how to make a fire. We're making this series for you, so you can learn our favorite and most practical methods. In fact, we just have one objective with this series: to make the most concise, educational, and hopefully entertaining fire videos you've ever seen, and give you the knowledge you need to master these methods yourself. Now that sounds like a challenge. Let's go. Why not kick off this series with one of our all-time favorites, the hand drill fire? Our love for hand drill fires comes from a decades-long relationship. And like any loyal relationship, it was built on a foundation of trust and reliability. The hand drill fire was the primary method of fire making for ancient Americans that lived in our region of the Pacific Northwest, because it's quick, it's light, convenient, and it only involves two pieces of equipment. But there's a couple things we need to clear up when it comes to this method, and some very common mistakes that most of our fire students have made. So we'll tackle those and get into the action, starting now. The ultimate fate of a hand drill fire all starts and ends with your materials and your notch. If your equipment is bad, it just doesn't matter how strong you are or how fast you spin that drill or how good your technique is. And the top two reasons most people fail is the wrong equipment and or a bad notch. In our experience, cedar makes the best fireboard, especially the outer layer of wood, or sapwood as it's called. Although cedar's our favorite, there's other woods that'll work too. Willow, cottonwood, aspen, ash, alder, maple, cascara, sage, juniper, pine, and lots of others. The board should have a flat bottom and no wobble, and should always be wide enough that it won't try to tip over one way or the other. For drills, you can use ocean spray, wild rose, serviceberry, maple, Indian plum, oak, and many others. Most shrub trees, in fact, can be used for making a fire drill. If you're using a softer, pithier drill, we prefer to use 9-bark, mullein, elderberry, red osier dogwood, willow, hazelnut, but our favorite drill is 9-bark. Basically, there's lots of combinations that'll work, but we prefer a hardwood drill on a softwood board. Now, if you got questions about certain woods you want to try, just let us know in the comments. In our case today, the cedar fireboard will be the softwood, and we use 9-bark and ocean spray for our drills. We typically carry even more than one drill with us to make sure we always have more than one option. The drill diameter should be about 3/8 to 7/16 of an inch at the bottom. Any less than 3/8 and it'll start to dig into the board too fast without building up enough char powder first. The tops of our drills are usually about 3/8 of an inch. That gives just enough thickness to get a solid grip and apply downward pressure as we're drilling. We prefer a length of about 21 inches for the drill, and it could be tempting to get a longer drill, but we learned that 21 inches is just about right for being able to maximize our body weight to create downward pressure, which is essential for getting an ember. Tall drills make it more difficult for using your own body's weight in working to your advantage. It can be done with longer drills, and it can be done with much shorter ones, but it's just not our preference. We're carving this notch using an Aboriginal style saw that we flint knapped from a piece of basalt. You might even recognize this handy little tool from its cameo appearances in our slate knife video or at lattle spear series. We'll do other notches later on with a modern knife just to show you how to do that as well. Now here's some pretty specific details about board and notch requirements. Again, these are two of the most critical things to get right in the process. The average length of board we use is usually about 9 to 13 inches, but that can vary some. The thickness of the board should be about 9 to 11/16 of an inch. At this width, you can get 2 to 3 fires out of the same hole. You don't want the char powder to have too far of a fall from the hole down to the tinder, as it'll cool off and take longer to accumulate. If the drop distance is too far, you'll expend way too much energy trying to fill up the distance between your tinder and the top of the notch. We determined you need about 5/16 of an inch of powder to achieve an ember. Also, your notch should not be too narrow, about 1/4 of an inch to 5/8 of an inch wide. If it's too narrow, your char powder is going to be obstructed and it'll start piling up on top of your board. If your notch is too wide, you risk having the tip of your drill slip down from the hole into the notch where the char powder is forming. The notch placement is crucial to achieving success with a hand drill fire. The center of the depression should be 3/8 of an inch to about 1/2 an inch from the front of the board. Any closer to that edge and you risk having your drill pop out. The notch angle can be from about 60 degrees up to perpendicular. The powder needs to have an immediate flow from where the drill is spinning. Again, if the notch is too narrow or shallow, the hottest powder is going to build up on top of the board instead of down at the bottom of your notch where it belongs. We're using cedar tinder to catch the char dust and ember. Cedar bark is an amazing tinder, but it needs to be processed soft and fluffy. Now, it may go without saying, but your equipment needs to be dry. We're not talking just dry to the touch. It needs to be totally dry, inside and out. Also, when your wood is too green or moist, the char powder will come out a little bit more gritty rather than soft and powdery like you need it. As with most tools that were made by Native Americans, fire drills specifically were cut green and then dried out over time, as is the case with our drills and the board that we're going to be using today. As we prepare to drill, we prepare a few things. First of all, we prepare mentally, and that might sound kind of strange to some people, but I can't think of any task that isn't improved by increased focus and concentration. We also prepare by making sure the ground is as level as possible. No spring action. If you use tinder to catch the ember, it should never be crowding the notch, impeding the passage of the hot char powder. We want to grind off any gloss at the end of the drill because that will decrease the friction and the heat. As we start out, we want to focus on tempo and breathing. This is not a sprint. If we were going to try and run our fastest mile, we wouldn't start off sprinting. We begin just by warming up the notch and applying some medium downward pressure on each pass down the drill. As we first see smoke, we do an assessment of where we're at physically, while understanding that the amount of smoke we see is now proportionate to the amount of downward pressure plus the speed and the revolution of the drill. Once I see smoke, I start watching the bottom of that notch. The goal at this point is just to build up a nice bed of char powder. There should be no bumping or jarring of the powder during this process. The end of the drill should always stay in the hole. I always use my thumb on top of the drill to help hold it in place before I take another pass. As I get closer to the end, I begin to lightly blow at the base of the notch. Now, I do this for a couple reasons. First of all, I want to see that secondary source of smoke coming from the ember, which is separate from the smoke created by the drill and hole on top. This is a crucial indicator that you've got your ember. The secondary smoke comes from the ember burning and growing in the char powder, but sometimes it can be hard to notice. So lightly blowing will expose that smoke as well as feed the ember with some extra oxygen. We've seen a lot of people get this far and then lose it at this point because they either get in a hurry or they go too slow. We like to use a bigger tinder bundle to put over our small bundle as we're nurturing the ember, and then straight into our kindling. Your kindling should be all ready to go before you begin drilling. Once you have consistent smoke, you don't need to rush it. Just keep it smoking long enough to heat the inside of your tinder bundle and char the tinder. But you don't want it to go into a flame before you've got it transferred to your kindling. I like to get it right to the edge of flame, but then let it smolder until I'm ready to light up my kindling. Sometimes people go too slow in the process at a critical point when they first start nurturing the ember. When the ember's that small, it could still go out in seconds if you don't keep feeding it. On the other hand, if you just start blowing really hard, you could break up the ember before it's had the chance to heat and char the tinder. Experience is the best teacher, as is the case with most things. So here's the most common reasons that these fires fail. Bad notch, too close. When the notch is too close to the edge, it'll make the drill pop out and even tip the board. I want you to watch what happens when I try using a notch like this. You see everything's going fine, and then you see the board start to wobble and tip because my drill slipped and it presses right down on the edge of the board, dumping the powder. The other common reason that these fires fail is a bad notch that isn't deep enough or wide enough. If the notch is too narrow or shallow, the char is just going to accumulate right on top of the board and it won't form an ember. Watch what happens when we try to get an ember from a notch that's too narrow and shallow. It'll also create this lip on the edge as we burrow straight down, and that lip is going to prevent the char from sliding down where it belongs at the bottom of the notch. Multiple tries in the same hole can also cause this, so you got to watch for this lip and carve it out if you're using the same hole for more than one fire. So we got to talk about why these fires work, because in our experience, most people who have failed at this method, and friction fires in general, are the ones who saw it done and decided that it was easy without getting the thorough breakdown in the details. Because again, it's our goal to make you successful at each method of fire in this fire series. First, our materials were good. The tinder was prepared. The drill and the board were free from any moisture. Next, the notch. The placement was good. It wasn't too wide, it wasn't too narrow. It was not too close to the edge of the board, but it wasn't too far back either. Next, the tinder was in place to catch the char dust in the ember, but not crowding the notch. Never let your tinder impede the flow of the char powder as it falls and tries to coagulate. We warmed up the drill and paced ourselves until we had smoke, using a medium downward pressure, and then we turned it on at the end until we had an ember. Our amber was then carefully nurtured in our processed cedar tinder until the moment of truth where we were able to light up our kindling. And that is the Wilderness Strong method for making hand-row fire. Now we hope you enjoyed video 1 of our fire series, but we are just getting started. We've got so much more we've got to show you, including bow and drill, ferro rod, flint and steel, and a rare fire building technique that we can guarantee you won't see anywhere else. In fact, it'll finally give the conclusive answer to a burning question that even experienced fire makers have carried for years. And we got the answer. If you're a fire lover, you do not want to miss the rest of this series. Thanks for watching. If you like what we're doing, you want to let us know, please hit the thumbs up, leave us a comment, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss all the exciting stuff that we've got coming up on the horizon.